Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. You know, I never imagined today would unfold like this. There I was, sitting alone in a dimly lit bar, just a stone's throw from the hospital where my wife, Eliza, had just given birth. It should have been a joyous occasion, right? But joy is a stranger to me now. I kept staring at my phone lying on the scratched wooden table. It buzzed again. Another call I didn't take. This time from Eliza's father. They must all be wondering why I wasn't there, celebrating the arrival of what the world thought was my newborn daughter. But deep down I knew, this child wasn't mine. I chuckled darkly to myself, thinking about the irony. Here I was, supposed to be a father again, yet all I could think about was the betrayal. Eliza, with her blonde curls and deceitful blue eyes, had lied to me. She claimed the baby was premature, born 6 weeks early. But I'm no fool. That baby was perfect, too perfect for a premature birth. Another Jack Daniels, I told the bartender, my voice steady, my resolve firmer. The whiskey couldn't drown the bitterness, though, or the sense of betrayal that gnawed at my insides. You see, Eliza had been spending a lot of time with Alex, my so-called best friend, before he died. They were supposedly just reminiscing about old times, but whispers and glances told a different story. When Alex passed away from cancer last month, Eliza cried more than anyone else. More than his own family. That should have been my clue. The DNA test was just a formality now. The hospital rushed it because of the special circumstances I insisted on. They didn't need to know those circumstances included my wife's suspicious timelines and a gut feeling sharper than a surgeon's knife. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Eliza. I didn't answer. What was there to say? Congratulations, Eliza, on your new baby. Who's the father this time? The doors of the bar swung open, letting in a cold gust of wind and a couple laughing about something probably trivial. I envied them for a moment, their ignorance, their bliss. Then the moment passed, and the bitterness settled back in. I played the next hours in my mind, over and over. I'd confront her. There'd be a scene, maybe tears. She would try to lie her way out of it, maybe throw Alex's name to soften me. But I was done. This was about revenge now, cold and calculated. No more Mr. Nice Guy, no more the fool husband. Tonight marked the end of our marriage and the beginning of her reckoning. The only redemption I sought was mine, and mine alone. As for Eliza, she would learn what it means to betray me. The bartender placed another drink in front of me, the glass clinking slightly as it hit the table. On the house, he said, a nod of solidarity perhaps, or maybe he just pitied the cuckold husband drinking his sorrows away. I took a sip, letting the fire of the whiskey steel me for what was to come. Eliza's world was about to crumble, and I would be the one to tear it down. You ever get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, like you've swallowed a block of ice? That's how I felt every time I saw them together, Eliza and Alex. It's funny how the heart senses things before the mind catches up. Growing up, the three of us were inseparable. We were the kings and queen of our little suburban court, bike riding, tree climbing, and getting into the kind of mischief that stitches childhood memories together. But as we got older, things changed, didn't they always? I dare you, jump. That was Eliza, always pushing the limits. Alex would laugh, his eyes lighting up like fireworks. Me? I was more the careful type, but around them, I found myself doing stupid things just to keep up, to belong. High school brought the real test, though. Eliza transformed from the tomboy next door into someone who suddenly seemed out of reach. Both Alex and I noticed, but it was like an unspoken pact, look but don't touch. Yet, as her long blonde hair shimmered under the sun and her laughter filled the air, I knew I wasn't the only one captivated. One chilly October evening, under the guise of studying, We found ourselves at my house. My parents were out. The perfect opportunity, right? Wrong. Eliza, you know I like you, right? My voice had trembled, betraying my cool exterior. Her response was a smirk, the kind that spelled trouble. Really, now? And what are you going to do about it? She teased, leaning closer. The moment hung between us, heavy and electric. Just as our lips were about to meet, the door slammed. Alex. His timing couldn't have been worse. Or perhaps it was perfect, depending on whose side you were on. What's going on here? His voice was light, but his eyes, they were like ice. Nothing, just hanging out, I stammered. Eliza sat back, an unreadable expression on her face. From that day on, things shifted. Alex was around more, always finding reasons to be close to Eliza. I tried to shake the nagging feeling, to drown out the whisper that something was going on behind my back. But you know how it is. The more you try to ignore something, the louder it gets. Alex, you and Eliza seem close these days, I ventured one day, trying to keep my voice neutral. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, his smile a little too bright. Yeah, she's great, isn't she? We're just friends, man. Don't worry. Friends. Right. The betrayal didn't stop there. It wasn't just them. It was also me. I let it happen. Every smile, every whispered conversation, every moment I turned a blind eye. It was like giving them permission. My silence was my sin, and it festered, grew into a monster that sat heavy on my chest at night. When Alex got sick, everything escalated. Eliza was there, always there, by his side. He needs me, she'd say, her eyes pleading for understanding. And like a fool, I nodded, pretended it was all in my head, that my wife was just being kind to a dying man. But here we are, the past crashing into the present, all the lies laid bare. No more denial, no more turning the other cheek. They chose their path and now, I'm choosing mine. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. Well, I've got a feast planned. It's a cruel trick of fate, isn't it? Just when you think you know someone, they peel back another layer, revealing the rot underneath. That's how it was with Eliza and me. Our marriage, once my sanctuary, had become my prison. The DNA test results didn't just confirm my suspicions, they ripped the last shred of hope from my grasp. I remember the moment clearly, the doctor's call cutting through the noise of the bar like a sharp knife. Mr. Harris, the results are in. I'm sorry, but you are not the father of Mrs. Harris's baby. His voice was clinical, detached.
Mine?
Barely a whisper. I see. Thank you, doctor. I hung up, the finality of it settling over me like a death shroud. I needed answers. No, more than that. I needed to see the look on her face when I confronted her. The drive home was a blur. The streets were empty, my heart emptier. But my mind? It raced, plotting, planning. When I walked through our front door, the house was silent. Eliza was in the living room, the baby cradled in her arms. Seeing them there, so peaceful, it almost made me doubt everything. Almost. Eliza, we need to talk. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What's wrong? Is it the baby?
No, Eliza.
It's us. It's you. My voice was calm, but my blood was ice cold. Who's the father? Her face paled. What are you talking about? You're being ridiculous. I laughed, a bitter sound that filled the room. Cut the act, Eliza. I know. The baby isn't mine. The DNA test confirmed it. The silence that followed was suffocating. She looked away, tears brimming in her eyes. But were they for our shattered life, or for herself? Why, Eliza? My voice broke. Why him? Why Alex? It just happened. I never meant for it. Stop. I slammed my hand against the wall, the sound sharp in the quiet room. I don't want your excuses. I want the truth. All of it. She sobbed, holding the baby tighter. It started when Alex got sick. He was so alone, so vulnerable. I wanted to comfort him, and one thing led to another. It wasn't planned. I swear, I never meant to hurt you. Comfort, I scoffed. Is that what you call it? You betrayed me, Eliza, with my best friend. And you kept it a secret until you couldn't anymore. How long were you going to lie to me? I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Her apology was a whisper, lost in the vastness of our living room.
Sorry.
The word echoed in my mind, mocking, taunting. Sorry wasn't going to fix this, wasn't going to glue back together the pieces of my shattered trust. You chose this, Eliza. You chose him over our family. There's no going back from that. I want you out. Take whatever you need and leave. But where will I go? What about the baby? That's not my problem anymore. You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our family. She cried harder, pleading, but I was done. The woman I loved, the life we built, it was all a lie. I watched as she packed a few belongings, the baby crying now, sensing the tension. When she left, the silence was oppressive, suffocating. I was free, but at what cost? The love of my life, the family I thought I had, it was all gone. But this was just the beginning. Eliza would have her time to grieve and regret. As for me, revenge had only just begun. There's a certain stillness that descends on a home when its life has been gutted out, a kind of silence that's heavier than noise. That's what it felt like in the days following Eliza's departure. The house was a tomb. Every room whispered memories of a past that was a lie. But sitting there, wallowing, that wasn't me. Not anymore. My grief was quickly fossilizing into something harder, sharper. Revenge, a seductive whisper, coaxed me out of inertia. It promised a salve for the wound Eliza had left. It was wrong, maybe, but it felt right, necessary even. It was the only way to balance the scales. First, I needed to secure my financial fortress. Eliza, I knew, would come for whatever she could get her hands on. So, I called up an old buddy who was now a hotshot lawyer. Mark, I need the best divorce lawyer you've got, I said the moment he picked up the phone. He was taken aback, maybe by the coldness in my voice. Man, I'm sorry to hear that. Sure, I'll send you the contact info for someone outstanding. Thanks, I'll need it, I replied, my voice a mask of detachment. Then there was the house, our house. I pored over deeds and mortgage papers, my mind working mechanically. Every asset, every investment, I documented, secured. If Eliza thought she could bleed me dry, she'd find the coffers empty. But my plans didn't stop at mere financial safeguards. No, I wanted her to feel the sting of her betrayal as acutely as I did. So, I started digging into her life, her routine. It wasn't hard. Mutual friends, still shocked by the separation, were all too willing to talk. I learned she was staying at her sister's place, just across town. Perfect. I began showing up at places I knew she'd be: restaurants, parks, the local grocery store. Always out of sight, but close enough. I wanted her to feel my presence like a shadow, to look over her shoulder and wonder if I was there. One day, I even walked right past her as she sat at a cafe with a friend. I didn't say a word, didn't even look her way, but I knew she saw me. The flinch was slight, but I caught it. Good, she should flinch. Hey, heard you've been bumping into Eliza, Mark called me one evening, a note of caution in his tone. Yeah, small town, I replied nonchalantly. You gotta be careful, man. You don't want this to look like harassment. I shrugged, even though he couldn't see. It's not harassment to visit public places, Mark. Anyway, thanks for the concern. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I remained unyielding. Every demand from her lawyer was met with a counter-demand twice as strict. If she wanted war, I'd give her one. No quarter given, none expected. The day of the final hearing approached. I was ready. The courtroom was just another battlefield. Eliza sat across the aisle, a shadow of her former self. Good. Let her be diminished. Let her sit there and think about everything she had thrown away for a fleeting moment of passion. When the judge finally banged the gavel, declaring our marriage officially over, I felt nothing. No relief, no sorrow, only a hollow victory. I had one, if you could call it that, but at what cost? Walking out of the courtroom, I glanced back. Eliza was crying, her body shaking with sobs. Part of me wanted to feel something, anything, for the woman I had once loved. But that part was buried deep, under layers of betrayal and cold calculations. The consequences of a lifetime, they say, stem from the choices we make. Eliza made hers, and I made mine. Now, we both had to live with them. I've learned that emptiness can gnaw at you, eat you from the inside out. After the divorce, my house felt like a hollow shell, echoing with the ghost of a life I once thought was mine. But emptiness, it turns out, can be a breeding ground for darker things, for plans born out of the bitter seeds of betrayal. I wasn't just going to move on. No, Eliza had taken something from me, something more than trust. She'd taken a part of my identity, the part that believed in love, in loyalty. And for that, I wanted to unravel her new life thread by thread. It started simply enough. I kept tabs on her through friends who, whether out of pity or loyalty, didn't think twice about sharing details. Eliza had found a job at a local bookstore, a quaint little place that suited her literary pretensions. It was perfect, too perfect. One rainy afternoon, I decided it was time to step up my game. I walked into the bookstore, a place vibrating with the quiet hum of pages being turned and soft music. Eliza was there, shelving books, her back to the entrance. I took a deep breath, steadied my nerves, and approached the counter. "Excuse me, could you help me find a book?" My voice was calm, collected. She turned, and for a moment, her face was a mask of composure. Then she saw me, and it cracked. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, just looking for a book." "You work here now, right?" "It's nice. Suits you." I smiled, but my smile didn't reach my eyes. Her hands clenched at her sides. "Please leave. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" "Eliza, I'm just a customer." I held up a book, a pointed reminder of my pretense. "Can you tell me if this is any good?" She glanced around, visibly shaken, but professionalism, or perhaps fear, won out. "It's well-reviewed. A good choice." "Thank you, Eliza. I hope you're doing well, all things considered." I let the words hang between us, a noose disguised as a farewell. After that day, my visits became more frequent. Always polite, always with a legitimate reason to be there, but each time I could see the strain on her face, the way she looked over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't watching. Fear, it seemed, was a thread easily pulled. One evening, at a mutual friend's party, I overheard a conversation. Eliza's name came up, tinged with whispers of concern. "I heard he's been visiting her at work." "It's a bit obsessive, don't you think?" someone said, their voice low. "Is it?" "I'm just trying to be a good customer." My interjection silenced the group, a blunt reminder of my presence. As the weeks turned into months, the threads of Eliza's composure began to unravel. Calls from mutual friends became more frequent, their voices tinged with worry, not for me, but for her. And each call, each worried inquiry, was a victory, a confirmation that my presence was weaving a cage around her peace of mind. But as I sat in my empty living room one evening, the victory felt hollow. The threads I'd pulled had unraveled her life, yes, But what of mine? What had I become? In my quest for vengeance, I'd lost sight of something crucial, the difference between justice and revenge. One healed, the other hollowed out. I'd chosen the latter. The phone rang, a shrill sound in the quiet room. Another friend, another inquiry about my well-being, masked in concern for Eliza. I let it ring. This game, this relentless pursuit, it had to end. Not out of forgiveness, but out of necessity. I was unraveling, too, thread by thread, into someone I no longer recognized. As the phone stopped ringing, the silence settled back in. In that silence, I made a decision. Enough was enough. Tomorrow, I would visit the bookstore one last time. Not to pull at threads, but to cut them loose, to free us both from this tangled web of vengeance. After all, some threads, once unraveled, can never be rewoven. I never thought I'd step into that bookstore again, not after everything that had unfolded. But there I was, standing at the threshold, my heart pounding not with the rage of before, but with a resolve that felt both terrifying and liberating. The bell above the door jingled softly as I entered, the familiar scent of books and coffee wrapping around me like a forgotten blanket. Eliza was there, her back turned to the door, rearranging books on a shelf. She still hadn't noticed me. I took a moment just to watch her, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the memories of who we once were. "Eliza," I said finally, my voice steady. She turned sharply, her expression a mix of surprise and apprehension. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," I said simply, holding up my hands to show I meant no harm. "Just talk." She eyed me warily but nodded, leading me to a quiet corner of the store. "What is it then?" "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, choosing my words carefully. "About us, about everything that happened." Eliza crossed her arms, a defensive barrier that made me pause. And I realized that what I've been doing, coming here, making you uncomfortable, it wasn't right. I was hurt, and I wanted you to hurt too. But it's not who I want to be. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "So what now?" "Now, I stop. I let go. Not for you, not even for me, but because it's the only way forward. I can't live in the past anymore, Eliza. And I don't want to drag you or anyone else back there with me." There was a long silence, filled only by the distant sound of pages turning and the quiet hum of the store. Finally, she spoke. "I never wanted things to end like they did. I made mistakes, big ones. And I'm sorry, truly sorry, for the pain I caused." Hearing her apologize, something I'd longed for, didn't bring the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, it just underscored how much we had both lost. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "And I'm sorry too. For how I reacted, for the pain I caused in return." Another silence fell between us, this one softer, less fraught. "So, where do we go from here?" she asked, a note of cautious hope in her voice. "We move on," I replied. "Separately, but peacefully. I hope you can find happiness, Eliza. I really do." "And you?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm going to try to find it too," I said, a small smile breaking through the solemnity of the moment. "Starting with forgiving myself." She nodded, and I saw a hint of the woman I had once loved, still there beneath the scars of our past. "Goodbye, Eliza." "Goodbye," she echoed, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't sound like a farewell to our past, but rather an acknowledgement of our futures, separate but hopeful. As I walked out of the bookstore, the weight that had been pressing on my shoulders felt lighter. The path forward wasn't clear, and I knew there would be difficult days ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them, not as the man I had become in my quest for vengeance, but as the man I wanted to be, shaped by my mistakes but not defined by them. A new beginning, not just in words, but in truth.